Preseason hasn't exactly been the most generous to the Jets, if we're being honest. And now, with a major injury to a star young prospect who had just earned a spot on the team, the Jets are going to have to make do and head into the regular season with a less than ideal lineup. We'll dive into all of that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But more than anything, we love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more and visit FanDuel right now because new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, like I said at the top of the episode, preseason finally over, and thank goodness, because honestly, it's been a bit of a mixed bag for the Jets, right? And look, no one really cares about preseason, but it is the first sort of taste of what we might get when the Jets kick back here in a couple of days and actually start the season. Obviously you don't want to read too much into it, but you get some ideas about early line combos, how some of the kids might fit in. And in the case of the Jets, we have a lot of new faces. So this was a big audition for most of them to see, where are they going to fit into the lineup? Who are they going to play with? And I think we have a much better idea now. But by the same token, with the veterans kind of not looking all that sharp, it'll be interesting this year. I feel like this is a season in which the Jets have maybe the most room to move stuff around and rearrange the roster because they have a decent amount of forward depth and they have guys who seem to be hungry for ice time. So that's great. I think bringing in competition is good. It wasn't really supposed to be like this, but you know what? Making the most out of the Dubois trade, it seems like the Jets have acquired some pretty quality depth. In terms of all the Kings players in I guess my rankings of, who stood out the most at the top is, of course, Gabriel Vilardi. We knew Gabe was going to be really good, but I think a lot of people were maybe surprised at just how good he was with some of his passes, his vision, the way that he was so creative in and around the net area. So that, I think, is a really good sign. He had some great passes. I think he honestly could have had more points this preseason, but either a pass maybe just barely missed or he had a good chance saved, maybe one that he dished off to a teammate or tried to take himself. So Vilardi, big ups for me. I was very impressed with him. Even when Scheifele and Connor maybe weren't quite up to speed, Gabe was still doing a lot of the hard work and still kind of doing stuff. And, occasionally he actually did look okay playing in a more central area. So I'm sure the Jets have written notes down about that. I don't think center is necessarily his best spot, but in a pinch, he could probably fill in there if needed. So great for Gabriel. He hates Gabe, apparently. Great for Gabriel. Good to see him, kick off with the Jets and look, quite honestly, very smooth. Like he's never been away from the team, even though he's basically just arrived. Second most impressive King, I'll go with Rasmus Kupari. Kupari, I thought, really put in some hardworking shifts in terms of the bottom six role. I thought he really showed that he has some room for growth, had some sharp offensive instincts, good passes, some good counters, and even did some PK work. So basically all that the Jets could have asked of him, he did, and I think he did it pretty well. Iafallo, maybe not nearly as noticeable so far, but I think he'll settle in nicely alongside Lowry. I expect him to bag, 45-ish points this year. I think that's pretty realistic with how good Iafallo has been in previous years, or maybe 35 to 40 points. Maybe we'll drop it down a little bit and make it perhaps more reasonable. But I do think he'll have a really strong season. I think he'll bounce up and down the lineup a bit just because I think we'll have some injuries. And Iafallo is kind of one of those guys who you can probably plug and play just about anywhere. Now, as far as the rest of the team is concerned, not great for the Jets against the Sens. This was, maybe one of the more forgettable performances. Winnipeg did have a couple of good, I would say, shifts of pressure in the second period, but other than that, not much going on for the Jets. So the biggest takeaway from this game, aside from Winnipeg just kind of stinking it up a bit, was that Ville Heinola got injured. Now, a lot of people will say, well, it's because he's too small. And I'm going to tell you right off, this had nothing to do with his size. He got caught and tangled up with an opposing skater. I think it was Eric Brandstrom, and then kind of fell and landed on his leg. And if you do that, anyone who's ever, whether you've done it through sports or something or work or who knows, if you fall on the wrong area on your knee or something, you can really do some serious damage. And it seems like, based on what Bones said after the game, Ville is probably going to miss a chunk of time, which really, really, really sucks. He was like right in there for a spot. It sounded like he had earned his role with the team, and having fought for years to get up to this point and to finally have the best preseason in camp of his career and finally get a chance with a big club, he has a bit of a freak injury. So let's hope for a speedy recovery. This team, quite frankly, could use his skill sets and his ability to move the puck. And honestly, on a personal level, it just really is kind of a bummer. I mean, I really thought that this was going to be a season, and now here it is, one game before the year starts, and he has a big setback like this that's not going to be a short-term fix. So all I can say is I hope the scans come back negative. It'd be really nice if he is only set to miss maybe a couple of games rather than a chunk of the huge or of the start of the season. So, cross your fingers. Hope for the best for Ville, because he really showed super well in camp. I think this was his most composed and controlled performance that we've seen from him in preseason, and that can only mean good things. But for the Jets in the meantime, this is just a really painful loss. I thought, he had basically done everything he could to stamp a role with the team. Bones basically said the same thing. Schmidt got knocked down the pecking order, and now we're back to where we were and where we started, which is not really where you want to be with this situation, right? Not how I was envisioning this year's blue line group, and I'm certain Bones was already thinking of making those changes, and now he'll have to go back to the drawing board. So, yeah, this was a really painful loss in a lot more ways than one. So, I hope that Ville comes back soon. I can't imagine that it's going to be an easy recovery process, but he's young, so that's positive, I guess. The younger you are, the faster and stronger you usually recover versus what happens when you start getting to your late 20s and early 30s. Your body just can't keep up with those repairs as much as they used to. So, yeah, I'm happy, I guess, in a way that it happened now rather than during the season, because I think if it happened later, that'd be much, much worse. So cross your fingers. Let's hope all ends well for Ville and that he is back soon. Now that the preseason is over, I thought I'd also talk about some broader themes from the preseason, things that looked good and things that I'm a little concerned about. We'll talk about all of that in just a moment. But before we go any further, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Those of you who have been following the NFL this year know that it's been very chaotic. I think the Bears just beat the Commanders a little bit ago. And, given how bad the Bears are or have been over the past couple of weeks, you really wouldn't expect that. But somehow they pulled it off. And it's just one of many upsets, I guess you could call them, throughout the league. Been very unpredictable. But even if your bet that you place for $5 doesn't pan out, FanDuel totally gets it, and they want you to come back. They give you bonus bets because they know that we can't all be winners, but you know what? The road to championships takes a few setbacks. And of course, the app is super easy to use. There's tons of betting options, from players to player props to spreads, over-unders, and so much more. So with those extra bets that you've got, FanDuel is here to give you a good time. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season in style. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we talk about overall trends from preseason, right? It was a brief bit of a firestorm of games, a quick couple of weeks, and now we're almost to the regular season. what do we take away from preseason, right? What are the big themes? I think the first theme is that the Jets have some legitimate forward depth. Now, it didn't always play super well in preseason, but I think we saw like the depth lines in general, just from what I saw, Barron, Nemesnikov, Kupari, occasionally Appleton, Lowry, those guys I thought put in some pretty hardworking shifts, and they actually got rewarded for it. We also saw some really good stuff from David Gustafson when he played. Just a lot to like from the bottom six this year that suggests this is a pretty deep group. Now, they might not like the score sheet every shift, but I'll tell you what, compared to last year, this team is like miles ahead in terms of skill and quality. So I feel like this forward group should be much deeper. I think there were shifts where we saw them start to push those advantages. They didn't always pay off, but I think we're going to see that start to gel together here over the next few weeks as Winnipeg starts getting up to speed, maybe get some of its veterans back into game shape, all of that good stuff. It's not something that I think is going to happen immediately, but so far, you know what? Some promising early signs. If I had to really identify some lines that I very much enjoyed, anything that Perfetti was on was instantly more enjoyable. I thought Cole was a genius with the puck, and he quite honestly found his line mates so many times for good scoring chances that maybe Winnipeg should have finished one or two more of these opportunities. I also thought the trio of Kupari, Barron, and Nemesnikov was brilliant. I mean, they had so many good physical shifts where they created space, created chaos down low, and honestly came close to scoring on a number of occasions. So that trio looks nice. I'm happy with it. I follow Lowry and Appleton were maybe not as noticeable, but you know what? I think in terms of being like a solid depth line that can rest the top six, it's a good enough group, right? It'll get the job done. And with a fourth line that looks quite elite backing them, I feel like this forward group is pretty okay. The only question is, how healthy is Ehlers going to be, and will he be ready to start the season? I think that there's been some recent debate about that, and it doesn't seem like he's entirely there yet for the start of the year, but at least it's not like a long-term situation where he's going to be held out for weeks. It sounds like he's going to be, back if he misses any games pretty early into the season. So something to keep an eye on. But the next thing that I think stood out is that the Jets defense is not very good as constructed. Aside from like DeMello, at times Morrissey, Sandberg, a lot of the veteran D really struggled. Dylan and Pionk in particular were playing together on a number of shifts, and they were just awful together. It was very, very bad. Even by my standards of having seen them work together last year, this pairing just looked beyond cooked. So not ideal, not great if you have to split them up during preseason. I know that Dylan has had slower starts at times, but this just really can't be happening at the start of the year. So a bit disconcerting. And I talked about it on the last episode that, all of these guys are very expensive given what the Jets are getting from them. And you're going to have to figure out a way to be more efficient with these cap allocations, because even with the rising cap, the Jets are going to have to give young talent raises. They're going to have to occasionally pluck a free agent here and there. And all of this used cap space is just making life very difficult for the Jets long term. So let's hope that they don't keep making these mistakes with a lot of term. I think term has gotten the Jets into more trouble than it's been beneficial. So something to keep an eye on. But yeah, the blue line, man, they were rough. Lots of sloppy turnovers. They struggled under pressure. Some really bad zone exit attempts and stuff. Just a lot where you sort of looked at last year's team and you thought, well, I've seen that before. So yeah, perhaps not the most ideal of situations for the blue line. But hey, once Heinola is back to full strength and stuff, I think he can potentially give the Jets a nice boost on the back end. Third and final thought for this one, from preseason, I did see the power play not look super great. Even with the added talent, I felt like the first power play unit was not really getting it done. The puck movement was a little more diverse. There was more variety. The Jets even got some good chances down low, but I just felt like some of the zone entries and stuff kept getting clogged. There were bad turnovers from players, especially guys who, quite frankly, know better. And it was just a bit frustrating to watch. The Jets' power play, I don't think, did particularly well and didn't finish a ton of opportunities. So, yeah, Not ideal, but it's okay. There's time to fix that. I could imagine, the more consistency with some of the new arrivals. Maybe that'll help. I guess I'm hoping that Shifley and Connor kind of start to warm up too. Those two getting going would be very helpful for the Jets going forward. But at least the new kids seem to be very hungry and have impressed so far. I guess if you have to take away one major preseason thing, it's that, hey, it's over. Joking aside, it does seem like the kids are increasingly fighting for roles with this team, and that can only be good for Winnipeg's future. We've talked about the Jets being a draft and develop team and not really knowing how to do that, but for once, it starts to feel like they're pushing in the right direction. So, yay. It only took a few years, but hey, maybe we're getting back to the basics and going with what the Jets should have been a whole time, which is a team that really builds through drafting, because that's how successful organizations do it. And it'd be nice if the Jets followed suit again so that they can start to challenge for a real playoff berth here in the near future. But of course, you're wondering what is next. How are the Jets going to do, and what are they going to do with some of the lineups over the next few weeks? We'll talk about that and how the Jets can essentially prepare for the regular season in double time in just a moment. But before we go any further, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league and your corporate sphere of influence, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't have to spend hours making multiple job listings. And best of all, data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Having something like an instant match service, which Indeed offers, makes this really convenient. They can find the best qualified candidates that are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than other candidates with their great feature set. And again, they've been doing this for a long time. They know how to help you find the best quality candidates. I've actually, as somebody seeking employment, used Indeed myself. It was very easy, very step-by-step. And of course, Indeed is there with great customer service. Indeed also knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have job requirements. They want to be cost-effective, and they want to make sure that you're not wasting time and money, because time is money. If you're ready to get started, visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring right now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing is not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts of tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we talk about what is essentially next for the Jets, because quite honestly, I think Winnipeg is in a very interesting spot. Although I will say with the loss of Heinola, that level of interest is maybe not not as ideal for me. I'm not thrilled with what happened at the end of that game, but you know what? It is what it is. The Jets are just going to have to move forward. And so based on how the Jets have been practicing for the last few weeks, I'm going to give you some potential line combinations that I think Winnipeg might go with. The first is going to be Connor, Shifley, and Verlardi, which I think this trio seems like it's going to be pretty set in stone. I don't think, despite some of the struggles with Connor and Shifley, that Bones is want to switch it up. I think he's going to go with that group. I think the other reason he'd really split it up is if that trio is just sucking, right? Looking terrible, playing awfully, all that kind of fun stuff. But I feel like it's going to do well enough to where he'll feel comfortable with that being his number one line. The second line should be Ehlers, Perfetti, and Niederreiter, though we'll have to see if Ehlers is ready to start. If he's not, Iafallo has kind of filled in there, but I would actually prefer to have Barron in that role. I think Morgan has more than done enough to prove that he is a guy who can operate in the middle six and do well. I think he'd be a great fit for Perfetti, who can find him down low. And when you have Niederreiter, who's really aggressive in space and honestly gets himself into good scoring areas, that's a pretty interesting trio. But once Ehlers returns, Ehlers, Perfetti, and Niederreiter together should be awesome. Your third line is going to be Iafallo, Lowry, and Appleton, which is fine. Like I said, I think this is, a very solid bottom six line, a group that's going to be physical, that's going to be able to eat up some PK minutes at times. And, the addition of Iafallo adds more scoring elements that the Jets have lacked in the bottom six. Alex is no slouch when it comes to finishing in front of the goal. And I think he was a little bit of an underrated acquisition, right? And I said that about Kupari as well, but I feel like Iafallo in particular, because he's paid a reasonable amount of cash, like $4 million, I think a lot of people sort of looked at his deal and looked at his production and felt it wasn't really worth it. But I think in Winnipeg, he has a chance to be very successful. Again, I don't know if it's going to be more than like 35 to 40 points this year, but let's hope that he finds a scoring touch and gives the Jets an elite top nine, because as it is right now on paper, the Jets are looking pretty good matchup-wise. I feel like the first three lines can really do some damage. Now, the fourth line should be Barron, Kupari, and Nemesnikov. And if preseason is anything to go by, these guys kicked butt. I mean, they were just awesome together. They were a complete wrecking ball. They created offensive opportunities. They were defensively very, very resilient. I mean, this was just a really good group. I mean, you really can't say anything more other than I wish they played more minutes. I think that is something that I'd like to see, split the minutes more evenly between the third and fourth lines. And I think you're going to have yourself a very good day. On defense, I don't think you're going to see any surprises here other than one pairing that might stand out. So the first pairing is Morrissey DeMello, and the second pairing in the game against Ottawa was Samberg Pionk, which, might tell you that the era of Dillon and Pionk might be coming closer to an end should Heinola eventually slide back in, because Heinola was playing with Dillon, and we know that Winnipeg traditionally likes to do like a more defensive guy and a more offensive guy. So assuming that Dillon and Heinola play together over the next few months once Heinola is healthy again, it should be a pretty good combo. Samberg and Pionk, Pionk has really looked bad the past couple of games, and honestly, given how he was last year and previous seasons, I think we know what we're going to see with him. So all I can say is good luck, Samberg. He will probably have his hands full. That is a very difficult assignment, although Samberg is a quality player himself. I just think it's a little bit much to try and ask him to shield, some of Pionk's maybe more haywire decision making. But it is what it is. Like I said, Heinola would help allay my fears a lot about this team. I think he would be a really big boost to the back end. It just is so sucky that he got hurt the way he did. Other than that, the Jets really do need to make a decision on the defense sooner rather than later. They've got Capobianco, Chisholm, Stanley, all these guys kind of hanging around the press box and stuff, and at some point the Jets are going to have to make a move and waive or trade somebody. So if the Jets can clear out this backlog on the D side of things sooner rather than later, it should also open up opportunities towards the trade deadline. The more cap space you accrue now, the happier your life is going to be come May. So, or was it March? Or I think more like March. But the Jets, if they make the right moves, if they do what I have suggested, I do think that this team has some really fun potential this year. But let me know where you think this team stands. Give me your season predictions in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. On our episode tomorrow, I'm going to be doing some fan polling to see how you feel about the start of the season. I'm probably not going to ask about Heinola because I feel like that's maybe too targeted, but at least for the other stuff, we'll get some feedback from fans, see how they're voting, and get a vibes check with the Jets. But for tonight's show, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. As always, we will see you back here tomorrow, so don't go anywhere. Have a great night, and go Jets, go.